Hello, my name's Tim Fisher. Today I'm going to show you how to paint flowers in acrylics in a looser, more impressionistic style. The subject I've chosen is white magnolias, so let's crack on now with the painting. Here on my canvas board you can now see my magnolia flower arrangement. Let's start by applying some paint onto the surface, and I've squeezed out three colours to start. I've squeezed out Naples yellow, yellow ochre and cadmium red hue, and I'm going to use those in varying proportions now to kill as much white on this canvas board as I can, but reserving some of the areas where the petals are. Just apply a little bit of water into the mixture just to give it a little bit of runniness, and I'm picking up a little bit of Naples yellow and yellow ochre and then flicking in some of the cadmium red into places, and I'm working quite quickly. Acrylics does tend to dry on you, so it's quite a good idea to work as quickly as you can, and you get the colours flowing into each other then and creating quite an interesting background to work into. I have to be careful where the flowers are, not overly careful, but I need to just reserve where those white petals are. So just working around with the flat brush. Flat brushes tend to give you slightly more of a calligraphic mark than a round brush, and it's quite nice for chiselling in to the edges of these areas. And as you can see, the original drawing is still showing through in places. Now then, just keep introducing a little bit of Naples yellow. I think Naples yellow has a lovely synergy with yellow ochre. The two colours seem to work extremely well together when you apply them onto a painting surface. Different acrylics have different rates of flow. Some acrylics are runnier than others, so if you find you've got acrylics that are a little stiffer than normal, don't be afraid to add just a little bit of water into your acrylic mix just to get those acrylics moving on the surface. Once I've passed the flower area, I can then just start to speed up a little bit with the brush strokes. Starting to get some directional strokes in now, so again these sort of long sweeping brush marks as we come further down, and this is going to help describe the background that the flowers are sitting on slightly better. So we're nearly there. I want to make sure I just finish off the white down here. I think what I may do on this bottom half, just to save a little time, is just introduce a little bit of brown into the wet paint, and I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna in there. Just flick a little bit of Naples yellow over the top. So I'm now going to add some of the burnt sienna very quickly into that mix while it's still wet. Acrylics do have a very short drying window. They will dry on you quite quickly, but as long as you don't hang about too long, you can usually get them to blend quite satisfactorily. Note I'm not using any white just yet. You don't really need it at this stage because you're using the white of the canvas to help to make your colours glow. So that's the first stage. What I'm going to do now is just give it a few moments to dry, and then I'm going to go in with the next layer of paint. There, the painting's dried off enough now for me to do some more work to it. When you're doing something that involves white flowers, the more tonal contrast you can get into the background, the better. One of the things you do find with acrylics, they are remarkably transparent. So one of the things I do, I introduce black, and generally it's Mars black in acrylics, and by introducing that you get a lot more strength and depth of tone. I've squeezed out Mars black, but also I've squeezed out some cerulean and some French ultramarine blue. That way I can just add some accent colours as I paint the background down, so it's just not one monotonous colour. I pick up little flecks of neat paint, they're little flecks of neat blue, and just flick those into the black, and that just helps to add those nice little accent colours, just to give the impression that there's something going on there in the background, that these flowers are actually amongst some other foliage, and you can just see little flecks and hints breaking through there in the background. Now the black or dark is going to carry down well through the flower heads, and this is going to make them really stand out as we paint down. Might just flick a bit of red in there as well. little bit of accent colour there, just for that bit of extra interest. And then just let that red mix into the black as we paint down. One of the things you do find is when you're painting these really dark backgrounds, you do get through an awful lot of black paint. And I can see I've run out already, so I'm going to have to just stop in a moment and squeeze a little more out. One of the nice things about acrylics, it's not like watercolour where you have to make sure you've got all your paint squeezed out and all your washes ready. You have actually got a little bit more breathing space so that you can squeeze more colours out or change your mixes slightly, which does make acrylics a nice, easy, forgiving medium to work with. And I always recommend people who are new to painting, acrylics are a super way of starting to learn to paint. Because they're so flexible in the way you can paint them. You can paint them like watercolours in a really loose fluid style, or heavy impasto with palette knives, or in between like an oil painting. They're really, really great fun, and there seems to be no end to the things you can do with them. It really is a super medium. Just getting down to the flowers now, and as I come down past the flowers, I'm letting the strokes break up a little so that it allows the previous underpainting to show through there. This petal here sticks out slightly from the others, so we'll just push a little bit of black in there. It's not pure black, there are just elements of blue going in there as well. It can look a little bit flat if you just stick with the one colour, so it's nice to keep varying that colour. And I'm also not filling the entire canvas surface with the paint, so I'm letting the brush scumble over the top, so I'm just catching the top of the weave of the canvas just to let some of those undercolours show through there. Just add a little bit more water, get that paint flowing again. As you work, the acrylics aren't drying all the time. The flow of the paint changes, and it's at that stage you just really need to be aware of that, and occasionally just add a little bit more water into your brush. Generally, when you're working with acrylics, the nylon or synthetic brushes are better. You tend to find the natural hair brushes are a little bit too springy. They're a little bit too flexible, and you tend to find you have more trouble mixing your paint and getting the paint to leave the brush and go onto the surface. But you can use, there are specialist acrylic brushes, but you can also use watercolour brushes. I'm using a nylon watercolour brush at the moment, and it's perfectly adequate for this type of painting. And now I'm going to wash the brush out. It's quite important really that you get rid of the black as much as you can so that it doesn't corrupt the colours I'm going to feed into it, which is the ochre and the Naples yellow that I used previously. So just very quickly work that back in. And now I'm using the brush, the chisel end of the brush, just to break that surface up, so it gives the impression that we've got lots of background twigs and bits and bobs, just setting that background up. So that's the next stage done. What I'm going to do now is just give it a few moments to dry, and then I'm going to start working back into it. I don't have to give it too long because it's quite nice that some of the slightly wet paint breaks into the paint I paint on top, but I'll just give it a few moments so that some of the thinner areas dry off, so it'll give me an almost soft and hard-edged approach to the painting.